Commander Ji-hoon pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation window. The blue planet below looked so small and peaceful. White clouds drifted over green and brown lands. Tiny lights sparkled where the humans lived in their cities. He could not believe that such a weak-looking world would soon bow before the mighty Kethran hegemony. War Prophet Dexara called Navigation Officer Murray from her station. Her voice was soft and respectful. She always spoke this way to their Supreme Leader. We are now in the best position to attack the target world. Dexara was huge, even for his species. His shell-like skin shined with golden words from their holy books. The writing covered his arms and chest, telling everyone about his divine power. He had 4 eyes that could see in all directions at once. When he turned to look at the tactical screen, all 4 eyes focused on the same thing: Earth. The humans had no idea what was coming. For 3,000 years, the Kethran hegemony had conquered world after world. They brought their divine mandate to every corner of the galaxy. This mandate was simple. The Kethran were chosen by the gods to rule over all lesser species. Every other race was meant to serve them. It was the natural order of things. Have the primitives answered our demands? Vexara's voice boomed through the bridge speakers. Communications specialist Dong Yoon looked at his instruments. Numbers and symbols flashed across his screens. No, War Prophet. They are still sending messages in their many different languages. They have not surrendered as one people. The War Prophet's mouthparts clicked together. This was how his species laughed. Of course they have not. They are like all the others we have conquered. They will learn their place soon enough. Let's begin the demonstration bombing. Hit their military base in the northern continent. Use these numbers to 39.1031N, 117.2021W. Far below on Earth's surface, Lieutenant Colonel Hiron stood in her command. Center the base was built deep inside a mountain. Thick concrete walls surrounded her on all sides. She had been waiting for this moment ever since the alien ships first appeared in Earth's sky 3 days ago. Suddenly, the mountain shook. The lights flickered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Through the security cameras, she could see the sky above burning with alien fire. Red and orange beams cut through the air like deadly lightning. The energy weapons melted through the mountain's surface as if it was made of butter. But Hiron did not run. She did not hide. Instead, she picked up her radio with steady hands. Oh. Stations, this is Blackbird Base. The demonstration is complete. Initiate Protocol Unity. I repeat, initiate Protocol Unity. These words traveled around the world in seconds. In Moscow, Russian generals heard the message. In Beijing, Chinese commanders received the order. In London, British officers understood what it meant. In Washington, American leaders knew what had to be done. For the first time in human history, something amazing happened. Countries that had been enemies for centuries suddenly stopped fighting each other. Soldiers who had been shooting at each other just days before now turned their weapons toward the sky. Politicians who could never agree on anything now spoke with one voice. In the Middle East, Israeli and Palestinian forces joined together. In Korea, North and South Korean armies began sharing intelligence. In India and Pakistan, generals who had been planning war against each other started planning war against the aliens instead. The message was clear across every continent, in every language, in every culture. The humans had found something they could all agree on. Nobody from the stars was going to tell Earth how to kneel. On the alien flagship, Dexara watched his screens with satisfaction. The demonstration had worked perfectly. The human military base was now a smoking crater in the mountain. Surely the primitives would surrender now, just like all the others. But something strange was happening on the communication channels. Instead of surrender messages, the aliens were picking up more and more human radio traffic. Military frequencies that had been silent were now buzzing with activity. The humans were talking to each other more than ever before. "This is odd," muttered Communications Specialist Dong Yoon. Usually after a demonstration, the target species becomes quiet and fearful. These humans are becoming louder and more organized. Dexara's 4 eyes narrowed. Irrelevant. Fear makes some species act strangely at first. They will surrender. Soon, they always do. But deep in his mind, a small doubt began to grow. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never seen a species respond to overwhelming force by becoming more united. Usually, they turned on each other in panic. They blamed their neighbors. They fought over who should surrender first. The humans were doing the opposite. They were coming together. On Earth, Lieutenant Colonel Hiron climbed out of her damaged command center and looked up at the alien ships floating in the sky. They looked like metal gods, powerful and untouchable. But she smiled anyway. "You just made the biggest mistake of your long lives," she whispered to the stars. "You gave humanity a common enemy." The war for Earth had begun. 3 days had passed since the alien demonstration. War Prophet Dexara sat in his command chair, waiting for the surrender messages to arrive. This was always the best part of a conquest. The defeated species would send their leaders to beg for mercy. They would offer their treasures and their people as slaves. They would promise to worship the Kethran gods and follow the divine mandate. But his communication screens remained silent of surrender. Instead, they showed something he had never seen before. The humans were talking to each other more than ever. "This is impossible," said Intelligence Officer Jayan, stared at the data flowing across his screens. His face showed confusion and worry. "They are sharing military radio channels. Countries that were enemies yesterday are now planning." Together, Vexara's 4 eyes focused on the intelligence reports. Numbers and charts showed human military movements across their planet. Something was very wrong. The humans were not acting like any species he had conquered before, Captain. Su Yang's voice crackled through the communication system from the surface. "War Prophet, we are seeing huge army movements. The humans have stopped fighting each other completely. They are joining their forces together." This made no sense to Vexara. Every species he had conquered before had done the same thing when faced with superior force. They panicked, and they blamed each other. They fought over who should surrender. First, the fear always made them weaker and easier to control. But the humans were doing the opposite. The fear was making them stronger. "This does not matter," Vexara declared, his voice booming across the bridge. "Fear makes some species act strangely at first. Begin Phase 2. Destroy their major cities. Once they see their homes burning, they will surrender." The hegemony fleet began to descend toward Earth's atmosphere. Dozens of sleek alien ships moved through the clouds like deadly birds, their weapons charged with energy that could turn entire cities into glass. This had always worked before. No species could resist when their homes were threatened. But as the ships came closer to Earth, something unexpected happened. The humans were ready for them. Deep beneath the city of Seoul, radar operator Minho watched his green screen in the emergency command center. White dots appeared on the display, moving closer to his position. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. Contact bearing 270. Altitude 15,000 meters and descending, he reported into his microphone. "All units, weapons free." The first hegemony fighter ship entered Earth's atmosphere, expecting to find primitive aircraft trying to stop them. Slub Commander Velthor piloted his ship with confidence. He had done this hundreds of times before, on dozens of worlds. The natives always sent their crude flying machines to fight, and he always destroyed them easily. But what rose to meet him was not primitive at all. The humans had taken the broken pieces of alien technology from the demonstration. Attack. They had studied them, understood them, and built them into their own weapons. A modified surface-to-air missile streaked up from the ground below. But this missile was different, carried alien technology inside it. The warhead exploded with the same energy that the hegemony used in their own weapons. Velthar had just enough time to feel surprise before his ship came a ball of fire over the Pacific Ocean. He never got to send a warning to his fleet. "Impossible," Vexara whispered. As reports flooded in from around the globe, ship after ship was being destroyed by weapons that should not exist. "They are using our own technology against us." In a secret bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Engineer Kangman held up a small piece of alien circuitry. The metal was still, warm from the crash site where they had recovered it. Wires and cables connected it to human computers and testing equipment. The power coupling is crude, but it works, he said to his team. We can adapt our weapon systems to match their energy frequencies. Dr. Yuna, who led the reverse engineering team, nodded with grim determination. She had been working for 3 days straight, taking apart alien technology and figuring out how it worked. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her mind was sharp. Get this information to every military base on Earth, she ordered. If these aliens think we are going to bow down to their divine mandate, they are about to learn what human stubbornness really means. All around the world, similar scenes were playing out. In underground labs in Russia, scientists were building new weapons. Hidden factories in China, engineers were mass-producing alien-human hybrid technology. Secret bunkers in America. Military planners were sharing their discoveries with former enemies. The aliens had made their first big mistake. They thought that primitive meant weak. They thought that less advanced meant less intelligent. They thought that a species without faster-than-light travel could not possibly understand their superior technology. They were wrong on all counts. Back on the flagship, Dexera watched his fleet burning in Earth's atmosphere. For the first time, in 3,000 years of conquest, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The humans had done something no other species had ever done. They had taken the hegemony's own weapons and turned them against their creators. They had united their entire planet in just 3 days. They had shown that being primitive did not mean being helpless. War Prophet Dexera was about to learn the difference between primitive and weak, and that difference was going to cost him everything. 6. Months had passed since the aliens first arrived at Earth. War Prophet Dexera had expected the war to be over in days, maybe weeks at most. Instead, he found himself facing something that went against everything he believed about how the universe worked. The humans were still fighting. The humans refused to accept our spiritual authority, reported Field Commander Cortex. His voice came through the communication system from the ruins of Paris. The beautiful city was now mostly rubble and smoke. They mock our sacred texts. They call us space fascists in their radio broadcasts. This Four Eyes burned with anger. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever dared to insult the holy words of the Kethron religion. The sacred texts were divine truth, given to them by the gods themselves. This is blasphemy, he growled. How many of them have we captured for re-education? There was a long pause before Cortex answered. That is the problem, War Prophet. We have not captured any. Every time we build a prison camp, they break their people out. They do not abandon their wounded soldiers. They do not surrender their leaders. They fight for every single person. This was impossible. Every other species the hegemony had conquered eventually gave up their weak members to save the strong. One's leaders would sacrifice their followers to save themselves. The wounded would be left behind so the healthy could escape. This was natural behavior. This was how survival worked. But the humans did the opposite. They risked everything to save everyone. High in the mountains of Afghanistan, Staff Sergeant Sung Ho crouched behind the burned wreckage of an alien transport ship. The metal was still warm from the crash. He spoke quietly into his radio, knowing the aliens might be listening. Ghost team to all units. The lizards are setting up another prison camp in Sector 7. We are moving to intercept. The voice of Colonel Juan crackled back through the static. Negative, Ghost team. Intelligence says they are expecting you this time. They have learned to predict our hit-and-run tactics. Sung Ho smiled grimly. We will adapt to their adaptation. That is what humans do. This was the truth that the aliens could not understand. Humans did not just fight, they learned. They changed. They grew stronger with every battle, even when they lost. 3 kilometers away, Hegemony Captain Velshin sat in his command post. MUNITORNG human communication frequencies. What he saw on his screens made him very uncomfortable. The primitives had done something that should have been impossible. They had turned the galaxy's most advanced surveillance network against itself. Every message the hegemony sent was being intercepted by human intelligence. The aliens' own communication system was being used to spy on them. It was like having the enemy read their mail and listen to their phone calls. "Sir," reported his communication officer, "the humans have broken into our tactical networks again. They are broadcasting our troop movements to their resistance fighters." Velshin's mouthparts clicked together in frustration. How is this possible? Our encryption systems are divine technology. They were blessed by the high priests themselves. Communication systems of the hegemony were supposed to be perfect. They were created using holy mathematics and sacred code. No primitive species should be able to understand them, let alone break into them. But the humans had done exactly that, on Earth. Cyber warfare specialist Tae Young smiled as he watched alien data streams flow across his computer screens. Lines of code scrolled past, showing him everything the enemy was planning. He had been working for months to crack their systems, and now he could read their messages like a book. "Divine technology, my ass," he muttered to himself. These guys use the same basic principles as any other communication network. They just wrapped it in religious nonsense. Beside him, Lieutenant Neon worked on a different kind of warfare. She was in charge of psychological operations, fighting a war for the minds of the enemy. Our screen showed recordings of alien commanders arguing with each other about the war. "We are broadcasting footage of their commanders fighting about the war's progress," she reported. Some of the lower-ranking aliens are starting to question whether their gods really want them to die for this. This was perhaps the most dangerous weapon the humans had developed. They were not just fighting the alien soldiers. They were fighting the alien beliefs. They were making the enemy question their own faith. The recordings showed hegemony officers shouting at each other in their command centers. Some wanted to retreat. Others wanted to use more extreme weapons. A few even suggested that maybe the humans deserved to be left alone. These recordings were being broadcast on the aliens' own communication networks. Every hegemony soldier could hear their leaders arguing and losing confidence. The divine certainty that had held their empire together for 3,000 years was starting to crack. The hegemony had made their second big mistake. They had assumed that their technology was too advanced for humans to understand, so they thought their encryption was unbreakable. They believed their communication networks were secure. They were wrong about all of it. War Prophet Thexera stared at the reports coming in from around the globe. His forces were being outmaneuvered by primitives who should not have been able to understand basic technology. Sacred communication systems were being used against him. His own soldiers were starting to doubt their divine mission. For the first time in his long life, Thexera began to wonder if the gods had made a mistake. 1 year had passed since the aliens first arrived at Earth. War Prophet Thexera stood in the Great Hall of the High Council, the most sacred place in the Kethran hegemony. His ceremonial armor was dented and scratched from battles that should never have happened. The golden religious writings on his chest were faded and burned. He looked like a warrior who had been defeated, not a divine conqueror. "The humans have done the impossible," he reported to the ancient leaders of his people. His voice was quiet and uncertain, nothing like the confident roar it had been a year ago. "They have taken the fight to space." The High Priest Morthok was older than anyone could remember. His 4 eyes had seen the rise of the hegemony from a single world to a galactic empire. Those ancient eyes now stared at the Sara with cold anger. "Explain this heresy," the High Priest commanded. The Sara's mandibles clicked nervously. "Have built spaceships using our own technology. The ships are crude and ugly, but they work. They have begun attacking our supply lines between their world and our outer colonies. Worse than that, the conquered species in 3 star systems have begun questioning why they serve us." This was the most terrible news of all. For 3,000 years, the subjugated species had never questioned their place in the divine order. They had always accepted that the Kethran were their natural masters. But now, seeing humans fight back successfully, some of them were starting to wonder if they could fight back too, far from the council chambers. In the cold darkness between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Jinsu stood on the bridge of humanity's first interstellar warship. The ship was called the Retribution, and it was nothing like the sleek alien vessels. It was built from pieces of crashed hegemony ships, human technology, and pure determination. The hull was patched with different metals. The engines were loud and crude. But it flew, and it fought, and it won. Contact on sensors, reported Navigator Yunji from her station. Gemini supply convoy, bearing 127 Mark 8. Jinsu smiled grimly. After months of hit-and-run attacks, his crew had become experts at finding and destroying alien supply ships. Each victory made the enemy a little weaker, and gave humanity more captured technology to study. "All stations, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Remember, we are not just fighting for Earth anymore. Half the galaxy is watching to see if the hegemony can be beaten." The alien supply convoy consisted of 3 large cargo ships and 2 escort fighters. They were carrying food, weapons, and equipment to the hegemony forces still fighting on Earth. The convoy commander felt safe in the empty space between worlds. No primitive species had ever taken the fight beyond their own planet. He was wrong. The Retribution struck like a wolf attacking sheep. The human ship had been hiding in the shadow of an asteroid, waiting for the perfect moment. When the aliens passed by thinking they were safe, the humans opened fire with weapons that used the enemy's own technology against them. The supply convoy never saw them coming. The hegemony had grown lazy over thousands of years of easy victories. They had forgotten that hunters could become the hunted. Back on Earth, underground resistance leader Junsu sat in a hidden bunker deep beneath the ruins of Seoul. His communication equipment crackled with an incoming transmission from space. The message was encoded, but he recognized the sender immediately. "All cells, this is command," the voice said. "The hegemony's war prophet is coming to Earth personally. He is bringing their entire remaining fleet for one final assault." Junsu had been waiting for this news. Intelligence reports had suggested that the aliens were preparing something big. Their attacks had become more desperate and more vicious as the months passed. Now he knew why. He sent the message to resistance cells all over the planet. In hidden bunkers and secret bases, human fighters received the same information. No. Alien leader was coming to Earth with everything he had left. This would be the final battle. In response, centers across the planet, the same grim smile appeared on human faces. They had been preparing for this moment for an entire year. Every day of fighting had been building up to this final confrontation. Engineer Hanyul spoke for all of them when she heard the news. "Good. Let him come. We have a surprise waiting." The surprise was the result of 12 months of constant work. While the aliens had been fighting a guerrilla war on Earth's surface, the humans had been preparing something much bigger. Been building, planning, preparing for the day when the enemy would commit everything to one final attack. The hegemony was about to make their final and most fatal mistake. They thought that humans would be impressed by their leader's personal attention. They believed that bringing their entire remaining fleet to Earth would scare the humans into surrender. They had no idea that humans had spent the last year preparing for exactly this moment. They did not understand that humans were at their most dangerous when they were cornered and fighting for their lives. War Prophet Thexera was coming to Earth to end the war once and for all. But he was flying straight into a trap that would end his empire instead. The humans were ready. The final battle was about to begin. War Prophet Thexera sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Divine Wrath as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Around him, the last ships of the once mighty hegemony fleet followed like wounded animals. This was all that remained of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, but it would be enough. It had to be enough. "All batteries target the human population centers," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of divine mandate. "Today we end this insult to the gods." The weapon systems of his fleet began to charge with deadly energy. Enough firepower to turn continents into glass, enough destruction to end human civilization forever. This was how all wars ended, with the superior species crushing the inferior one completely. But as his weapons powered up, something impossible happened. The sky around Earth erupted with defensive fire, unlike anything the hegemony had ever Seeing what looked like peaceful satellites suddenly revealed hidden weapons. Space stations that seemed to be for communication began firing massive energy beams. Even pieces of space junk that floated in Earth's orbit turned out to be disguised weapons platforms, Dasara whispered as his fleet began to fall apart around him. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds were being destroyed by weapons that should not exist. They have turned their entire orbital space into a fortress. Every piece of metal that humans had launched into space over the past year had been a weapon in disguise. Every satellite, every space station, every rocket that the aliens thought was primitive technology, all of it was armed and ready. The humans had turned their entire planet into a giant fortress. On Earth's surface, General Hyunwoo watched the alien fleet burn through the sky like falling stars. He stood in the command center that had been built deep underground, surrounded by screens showing the battle above. A grim smile crossed his face as he watched ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia die in Earth's atmosphere. "Is what happens when you give humans a year to prepare and a reason to be angry?" he said. The divine wrath fell through the sky like a burning mountain. Nixara's last sight through the viewport was of human rescue ships, racing toward the impact site in the Pacific Ocean. But they were not coming to finish off the survivors. They were coming to save them. The great alien flagship hit the ocean. With the force of a small meteor, waves hundreds of feet high spread out from the impact. The ship sank quickly, but not before human rescue teams arrived to pull survivors from the wreckage. Dr. Chae-young led the medical team that found War Prophet Dexara floating in the wreckage of his command center. The alien leader was dying, his four eyes dim and unfocused. She knelt beside him as her team worked to save what was left of his crew. "We could have been friends, you know," she said quietly. "Humans are good at making friends, but you chose to be bullies instead." Ixara looked up at her with confusion. In 3,000 years of conquest, no enemy had ever tried to save his life. No defeated species had ever shown mercy to their conquerors. This was not how wars were supposed to end. "Why?" he whispered with his last breath. "Because that's what humans do," she replied. "We save people, even the ones who tried to destroy us." 6 months later, the human fleet liberation arrived at the former hegemony homeworld. Captain Wu Zhen stood on the bridge, looking down at a planet that was no longer the center of an empire. Below, millions of former slaves were building their first free cities. Species that had been conquered centuries ago were finally governing themselves. "Message from the surface, Captain," reported communications officer Arium. "The last hegemony holdout has surrendered. They're asking for terms." Wu Jin thought about all the worlds the hegemony had conquered over the centuries, all the species they had enslaved,
all the lies they had told about the divine mandate
and cosmic order, all the suffering they had caused in the name of their gods.
"Tell
them the terms are simple," he said. "No more masters, no more slaves, no more gods who demand others kneel. It's just people trying to figure out how to live together." Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The hegemony was gone. The empire that had seemed eternal had fallen to a species that most people had never heard of. Humans had done what everyone thought was impossible. They had defeated the undefeatable. But more than that, they had done something even more remarkable. They had won without becoming conquerors themselves. They had freed the galaxy without enslaving it. It had shown that victory did not have to mean domination. In the end, the hegemony had received their divine intervention. They had learned that sometimes the universe sends retribution wearing the face of a species that refuses to be conquered, refuses to kneel, and refuses to let others suffer in chains. The gods they had claimed to serve were silent, but the humans they had tried to enslave were very, very loud. And their message was clear. Nobody gets to be a bully anymore. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun, and it all started with a species that refused to kneel.